Hi there, my name is Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel Bandy's Books, and today we are here to do the mid-year book Freakout tag. Now I know it's the end of July and we're very close to being out of the middle of the year, so I wanted to make sure that I got this video done before the end of the month. I'm a little bit behind with things this month, and so here we are running late as per usual. But make sure you stick around because I'm going to be talking about a lot of things book related, telling you about some of my favorite reads, some of my most surprising books, and a few of the books that I was really disappointed with. And so you'll get a really good picture of what my reading has been like for the last 6 months, and hopefully you'll add a few new things to your TBR. And before we get into the books, I just also wanted to mention really quick that if you hear some snoring in the background, my dog Luna is asleep in her bed here in the living room. I live in a small apartment, and aside from that, she follows me wherever I go. So she can often be seen in my videos or snoring in the background. And I know that this particular video brings in a lot of new viewers, so if you hear that and you're just like, what's going on? That's why. I promise there's nobody like snoring on my couch behind me. So the mid-year book Freakout tag. This is one of my favorites to do and one of my favorites to watch because I love getting kind of a feel of how people's reading years are going, and mine is no different. I'm looking forward to talking about all of the things that I read. The original tag was made by a channel called Is That Chami, and that channel no longer exists on BookTube, but credit where credit is due, that is the original creator. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions now, and I can start telling you about all the things that I've been reading. Question 1, best book you've read so far. I'm still not sure on the order. I needed some time to like sit and think about what's going to be 1, 2, and 3. And this is in no particular order. So first book that I'm going to talk about is Kindred by Octavia Butler. I read my first Butler book last year with Parable of the Sower. I was convinced to bump Kindred up on my list by this fantastic review by Kindles and Kicks. I've referenced it several times on my channel. It was one of the most precise and eloquent and emotional book reviews that I have ever listened to, and it really inspired me to push Kindred up, and I'm so glad that I did. Everything that he said in his review was very accurate. I found myself really connected to this book, connected to the struggles that the main character was going through. The scenario that is presented in this science fiction world is horrifying, brutal, dark, and it really makes you consider a lot of different themes. This is science fiction at its best. It is masterful work, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. And the next book that I'm going to talk about is A Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James. So I picked this book up from a little free library around Christmas time. I was doing a road trip back to San Diego, and I stopped in a little local free library here in San Diego and happened to find a beat up paperback copy of this book. And I put it on my shelves. I was like, oh, this is kind of a long book. I don't know, we'll see. And I got to it, and I'm so glad that I didn't let the page count stop me. This book is fantastic. This is a story that's told through multiple POVs, and it is a story that centers on the attempted assassination of Bob Marley. And what is so brilliant about this is how far this timeline goes. Like, it goes so far away from the assassination and works its way forward, and then it passes the assassination and continues afterwards. And it's set in different locations, and each character is so distinct and unique. This is just, again, a masterwork in writing. This is character research, this is historical research. This is really taking an important historical piece of Jamaican history and bringing it to life in a special way. I loved it so much that when I was on my road trip across the Southwest, I saw this special edition copy in one of the bookstores I visited, and I went ahead and picked it up for myself. I can't rave about this enough. And book number 3 that could potentially be my favorite of 2024 is All the Little Bird Hearts by Victoria Lloyd Barlow. So this is a book that follows a woman, and initially, this woman lives at home with her daughter, and they have kind of an isolated life. They are very close with each other, but life is very precise. Everything is very specific. They eat certain foods, they have certain routines, and they don't deviate. And then they have some neighbors move in next door. And the woman in this couple is just like a lot of fun. She's the life of the party, and she recognizes that this family next door is very isolated. And she starts to kind of ingratiate herself with them, invite them over for dinner, and build a relationship with them. Our main character struggles with it. You can see that she clearly doesn't know how to behave in social settings. She has specific rules that she's picked up from books that she's read, but nothing comes easy to her. As you read this book, it becomes clear that our main character is autistic, and that this book is set in a time period in which autism is not recognized. And so she's particularly isolated because everybody views her as strange and they don't understand why. This is a book that I think so beautifully described what the experience of an autistic person might be like. Obviously, every person's experience is going to be different. So that's not to say that every single person that is autistic is going to relate to every single thing in this book. But what I thought it did beautifully is it allowed me to get into this character's head and to see what life is like and to see the struggles and to really empathize. And it made me think about my own behavior towards people that are struggling to deal with social settings and how I could maybe better assist or be more understanding. And I think when a book makes you consider things like that, especially a fictional book, I think it's been a really successfully written book. Question 2, best sequel that you've read so far. So technically this is cheating because I read this 1 week into July, so doesn't exactly count in the first 6 months because it happened in the 7th month, but it is the only sequel that I've read so far this year, and so I've got to use it for the answer. And that is Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the final book in the Between the Earth and Sky trilogy. The first book in this series was Black Sun. The second book was Fevered Star. Black Sun was one of my favorite starts to a fantasy series ever. It was fantastic. The characters were so interesting. It just set up this really complex and intriguing world. It reminded me a lot of South American indigenous culture, and I just thought what Rebecca Roanhorse did in it was so fantastic. Fevered Star was really solid as well, but it was kind of one of those books that was transitioning you from book 1 where everything started to book 3 where everything is going to conclude. A lot of setup, a lot of world building, a lot of moving pieces around, and I thought it was solid overall. So this was definitely one of the books that I was most excited to see drop in 2024. I was extremely fortunate because Saga Press and Rebecca Roanhorse sent me an ARC. And not only did they send me an ARC, they sent me a signed ARC on top of it, which just made my whole day. This was a very solid end to the series. There are things that I wish were a little bit different. There were a couple plot threads that were left open-ended, and not everything was perfect. There are a few things that would have made this a 5-star read had they been just tweaked slightly. But overall, I'm happy with the conclusion of this book. I'm happy with the direction that the characters went, and I just really, really enjoyed this series. I look forward to seeing what Roanhorse does next. I hope that it's another epic fantasy. Question number 3, a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. Okay, I could give you a list like 100 books long, honestly. So every month I do book of the month predictions and aardvark predictions. And so that means that I am constantly focused on new releases. And I also have a NetGalley account where I have requested far too many books, so extra aware of new releases. So I'm just gonna keep it to one book, and it's one that I already have on my bookshelves. And that is Little Rot by Akwaeke Emezi. This is a book that just released, and I actually picked it up on its release day. I love Emezi's writing. I feel like Emezi is the type of writer that no matter what genre they cover, they go into such deep thematic explorations. Their works always say a lot. It doesn't matter the genre, it doesn't matter the topic. You're not gonna read their writing and not be like left thinking and pondering and feeling things. This is a horror novel, and that is really all that I know about it. I haven't delved much deeper into it because I want to allow myself to just be surprised by their writing. Emezi is quickly turning into one of those authors that's going to be an auto-buy author for me, and so I'm super excited about Little Rot. Question number 4, most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. So like I mentioned in the previous question, I'm super aware of all the new releases, and so I have a massive list. But off the top of my head, There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak comes out in August, I believe at the beginning of August, and that is a book that I am really excited about. I love Shafak's writing, and I think that she does just this beautiful description. She captures time periods exceedingly well. Her books are usually emotional and deep and again, thematically rich, something that I really go for. This is a book that I believe covers 3 different time periods and 3 different situations and kind of intertwines them together. I know that in the most current time period, the main character has just recently gotten divorced and is living on a houseboat on the River Thames. And I think that links back to the very first of the timelines where we have a gentleman who's born on the banks of the River Thames in like a homeless encampment. This sounds like it's just gonna be so fantastic. I have high expectations for anything that Shafak writes, but in particular, this one's getting really good buzz. Question 5, biggest disappointment so far. All right, so when we talk about disappointing books, it doesn't necessarily mean to me that it's the worst book that I've read this year. That's because there are things about it that I liked. And that book is Land of Milk and Honey by Pam Zhang. So this is about a character who is a chef. We're in this post-apocalyptic scenario. There is really severe food scarcity, food shortages, famine. And so basically working as a chef is not really a practical job anymore because people really don't have options to eat a lot of things. And then she gets hired to go work in this really rich, exclusive community. And so I thought that this was going to talk about access to food and gluttony and just all of these really deep themes around food and food scarcity. And instead, it ended up being this weird kind of literary dark horror, but not really horror-y. It had speculative science fiction elements. It just, to me, it felt like this book didn't really know what it wanted to be. And that's fine if the book is written well and thought-provoking, but it wasn't that either. There was so much that this book could have done and failed to do. And so for that, it was super disappointing. I thought that I was going to connect with this book very strongly because of the chef main character. And in fact, I felt myself really frustrated with a lot of the things that the main character did. I found the motivations of the people that hired her to be confusing. I never really got a clear understanding of what was going on with anyone. It just, again, this could have been super thoughtful commentary on access to food and topics relating to food, and instead it just turned into this weird hodgepodge of things. Question number 6, biggest surprise so far. So I was scrolling through NetGalley at the beginning of June looking at the audio ARCs, which I do periodically, and then, I look for the books that I'm really excited about reading. And I saw this really bright, vibrant cover, and it was like pinks and purples with black lettering, and it just really called my attention. And the title also was kind of interesting to me, but it was also an author I had never heard of, completely unfamiliar with them. And so I clicked the summary, I start reading, and I'm like, oh man, this sounds fantastic. And then I looked at the cast of the audiobook narrators, and I saw like TJ Klune and a whole bunch of different authors that I really enjoy. And that made me go, who is this guy? So the book that I'm talking about is Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. This book is kind of a thriller-esque, high-octane horror with a lot of thematically rich discussion. We have a character named Misha who is a screenwriter for movies and TV. And he's been working on this film series, and he has 2 female lead characters, and they're coming up to the conclusion of the season at which these 2 female characters are going to announce that they're lesbians and in a relationship. And then the studio execs come to him and say, hey, we get where you want to go with this, but we've done some polling, and we've found that in the polling with our audience members, if you kill them both off, then it'll actually be better. And so we don't want you to announce that they're in a couple. We want you to kill them before that happens. And he's really conflicted because he doesn't want to be part of queer baiting in Hollywood. He wants that moment where they're actually officially a couple and get to be in a relationship. The studio execs tell him, look, man, you really need to reconsider, because if you don't do this, we'll just get rid of you and we'll use AI to go ahead and do this anyways. He's sort of stuck, and he's really conflicted about what to do. And as he's mulling it over, he starts being attacked by the villains in some of his movies and TV shows. This leads him on a quest to figure out what's going on. And I was on the edge of my seat. So I didn't know who Chuck Tingle was. I had never ever heard of him before. And I liked Bury Your Gaze so much that I actually literally, when I finished it, went into Libby and found his previous book, Camp Damascus, and put that on hold. And I'm actually now listening to that and enjoying it as well. This was everything that I want horror and thrillers to be. It was funny at points, it was dark, it was gory, it was fast-paced, it kept me guessing, but it also had themes in it. It wasn't just, like a gory slasher, like it said poignant and important things. And so that, for me, made this book such a surprise. Question number 7, favorite new author so far. It could be a debut author or an author that's new to you. So piggybacking off of the last question, I'm gonna go ahead and say that Chuck Tingle is one of my now new favorite authors. It is rare that I read a book by an author and I'm so excited about it that I go and get their next book, like in the same day. I mean, I definitely will put authors that I really enjoy on lists and look through their, backlist and figure out what I want to read. I'll maybe even read 2 or 3 of their books in the same year, but it's rare that I'm like, oh, I really enjoyed this. I want more right now. But so far, based on my experiences with Bury Your Gaze and my reading experience with Camp Damascus, which I'm about 70% into so far, I think that Chuck Tingle, at least for his horror and thrillers, I will definitely be reading. I've also since come to understand that he writes a bunch of erotica, which he calls tinglers. I probably won't delve into that because that's not really my style, but definitely on the horror front, I am a concrete fan now. Question number 8, newest fictional crush. I don't really do this. I don't read romance, so I don't feel like I attach to characters in that way. Even on the couple occasions that I have read romance, I don't really do the fictional crush thing. Nothing applicable, I guess. Question number 9, newest favorite character so far. So kind of the same thing. I don't know that I get super attached to characters for the most part. I mean, there are times when a character really stands out in my mind. I guess if like forced to choose, for example, in Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse, there's a character named Giala that I really loved. And I was so glad that Mirrored Heavens showed us a lot more of her story. Gup from The Guncle Abroad by Stephen Rowley is also a really fun character. I enjoyed my time with him. And Misha from Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle was also a lot of fun. But I don't know if like they're my favorite character, just those are the ones off the top of my head that I was like, oh yeah, I enjoyed my time with them. Question number 10, books that made you cry. Saddest books you've read so far. So I'm not somebody that typically cries from books. I do get very emotional. I have definitely felt some very complex things from reading, you know, dense, heavy, emotionally impactful books, but I have yet to actually physically shed tears from a book that I'm reading. But so far this year, I've had 2 books that I can think of that really elicited a very strong emotional response. One of them is nonfiction and one of them is fiction. First up, we have We Were Once a Family by Roxanna Asgarian. This is just the type of book that I feel like should make everybody extremely emotional. It should make you sad, it should make you furious, it should make you want to go out and protest and boycott and picket and fix a broken system. It is a book that I found myself reading and feeling so much just rage and disappointment and sadness and heartbreak, but it's so beautifully written. This is a story about the foster care system in the United States, which is extraordinarily broken. And in certain states, it's even worse than in other states, depending on like the local rules of the state. So this book talks about a case that made headline news here in the United States. A white lesbian couple adopted 6 children from the foster care system. All 6 of those children were Black, 3 of them from one family and 3 of them from another family. And there were allegations of abuse by these women, allegations that they were starving the children, allegations that they were preventing them from like socializing, all sorts of crazy stuff. And this eventually led to these 2 women packing the kids into their van and driving off a cliff and killing the entire family. So they killed all 6 children. And what makes this book so tragic and heartbreaking and sad is that it does the best reporting possible. It does not focus on the perpetrators, the murderers. It doesn't focus on these 2 women and their motivations. I mean, it does discuss the crime and it does discuss allegations. It centers instead on the families who had their children removed. And it talks about how the foster care system failed not only these 6 children, but these 2 families. It talks about, you know, the questionable politics of the courts that made decisions about removal. It talked about the questionable decisions that the social workers made, the questionable decisions made by medical professionals, the fact that there were family members willing to step up and take these children. It talks about how the parents never stopped fighting for their kids, never stopped petitioning the courts and the social workers to have visitation at least, how they never stopped bringing their children gifts, how they never stopped thinking about their kids. And it shows the effect of this whole tragedy and how it's affected people for generations now. This is a book that is excruciatingly heartbreaking. It was so sad. It was rage-inducing. I felt like I wanted to chuck it across the room. I was so angry at several points. But it is an important read. People, especially here in the States, need to understand how the foster care system works. There needs to be an understanding that the families are held to far more accountability than any of the foster parents or the group homes that these children are sent to. There is little response to allegations of abuse by designated caregivers once the child is removed. The process for a family to get their kids back is virtually impossible. Social workers often give incomplete information to trick parents into relinquishing their rights. It's one thing after the other. And then in this particular book, they highlight the added racial injustice of how Black people are treated within this system. It's a book that I think everyone really should read, but definitely one that you have to be prepared for the emotional impact of. In terms of fiction, the book that I found to be the most emotional was The Women by Kristin Hannah. So this is a book that follows a young woman from a fairly privileged upbringing in Coronado, San Diego. And she joins the army as a nurse during Vietnam. She is inspired by her brother signing up and she decides to do her duty as well. She does several tours in Vietnam as a nurse. She is exposed to direct combat. She loses people. She is dealing with significant post-traumatic stress. And then she returns home from doing her duty to a family that doesn't know how to relate to her anymore. They expect her to be the same proper lady she was before she was bombed and shot at and, you know, had to amputate and do all these horrific things. And she's just not that person anymore. She's angry, she's full of rage, she's having nightmares, she's not sleeping. And she returns to a system where she's not recognized as a nurse. She's trying to get a job at a hospital and they're treating her like she's just got out of nursing school when she's been dealing with horrific wounds of war. Nobody takes her experience seriously. Nobody believes her when she says that she was a combat nurse in Vietnam. People constantly tell her, oh, you're lying, women didn't serve in Vietnam. And this continues on for a long time. There's some questionable romantic relationships in it that also are very emblematic of people dealing with trauma. I thought that this was a book where Kristin Hannah really adequately covered post-traumatic stress and some of the repercussions of it. I think this book was particularly emotional for me because my ex-husband served 2 years in Iraq, and when he came home, he had a traumatic brain injury and really severe post-traumatic stress. And so in reading this book, I found myself looking at this character and going, so much of this is familiar, so much of this is stuff that I experienced, so much of this is stuff that I witnessed. And watching this character struggle through it and trying to find a place where she's like somewhat happy or somewhat healthy and failing over and over and over again. It was just something that I felt touched me very personally. I think that most people reading this book would find it sad. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be sad to the average reader, just that if you have experience with like combat related post-traumatic stress, it might be particularly emotional for you. I think that this was one of those books where Hannah also really shined for her research. People often cite like The Nightingale as her best work, and I think it's because it's one that was really thoroughly researched and where she really played on strong emotions and the choices that people have to make in combat. And I think that she took some of those skills and used that in The Women as well. The end of the book talks about the research and the detail that she went into and how she contacted all of these female veterans from Vietnam and talked to them about their stories. And I think that that shows in the writing. I think that that realness that you feel as you follow this story is because of that impeccable research work for this book. Question 11, book that made you happiest so far. So I don't read a whole lot of light and fuzzy, and so when I do, I try to really make it count. I'm very particular and choosy. And this year, The Guncle Abroad by Stephen Rowley came out. I really loved The Guncle. It was a book that I was late to. Honestly, I saw a lot of people raving about it, and I was kind of like, we'll see. But after reading The Guncle and loving it, I was really excited to get back to the Gup, or Gay Uncle Patrick. This book was a lot of fun. Gup has his niece and nephew again, and there's some tension because their father is remarrying an Italian woman, and they do not like her. They feel that she's trying to replace their mother. The relationship is strained. The kids are getting a little older, so there's some like teenage or preteen rebellion going on, and Gup is trying to navigate all of that. He's trying to help the kids cope, and he's trying to help them enjoy this trip through Europe. It's a moving book. I will say that it's not as good as the original Guncle, but if you need a lighter, fluffier read with some, emotional bits and pieces here and there, then I would definitely recommend this one, especially if you liked the Guncle. Question number 12, favorite book to film adaptation that you saw this year. So I'm not a lot of fun in this department. I read a lot of books, but I don't watch a lot of TV or a lot of movies. I maybe see 2 or 3 movies a year, and I'm very particular about what I watch. The only adaptation that I've seen so far this year was Killers of the Flower Moon. Oz and I went to see that in theaters, and I thought that that was really well done. I actually saw the movie and then read the book afterwards, and I felt like the movie held pretty true to the content of the book. The only other adaptation that I've been watching recently is something I'm not sure really counts for this question because it relates to comic books. So while I was recovering from surgery, I decided that I was going to rewatch the entire Marvel universe. So I'm not like super huge into comic books, but I do enjoy Marvel. I grew up watching like X-Men and Captain America and Thor and Iron Man and all of that. And so I have seen a lot of the older Marvel stuff, and I'm not as up to speed with anything after Endgame. But there are quite a few things that have come out semi-recently that I really want to see. And so I decided that I was going to start at the beginning and like refresh in the whole entire thing. But that's a huge undertaking because it's like 40 different things that you have to watch. There's a ton of movies, there's a whole bunch of TV series, and then there's a bunch of these little one-shots. They're like 5 to 15-minute videos. Luckily, Disney Plus has everything. They have a whole Marvel channel in their package. And so it's all kind of organized in order depending on what universe you want to watch. So thus far, I have watched my way through like the first 10 movies in the Marvel universe. I've watched like 5 of the one-shots, and I am in the middle of watching S.H.I.E.L.D., which is about the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. It's a TV show. It's been a lot of fun catching up, and watching these movies like in close proximity to each other has allowed me to appreciate the Easter eggs and things that are dropped from one movie into the next. And so I'm hoping that as I get into the movies that I haven't seen, having that background information of watching all the previous stuff will really help me enjoy them. Question number 13, favorite review that you've written this year. So I'm gonna answer this question 2 ways. On my Storygraph and Goodreads, where you can find me at Bandy's Books, I really enjoyed my review of Bury Your Gaze and my review of Annie Bot. I thought both of those were books that I felt really strongly about, and so those reviews came with ease. I was able to articulate, I think, pretty effectively what I liked about the book and set a reasonable expectation for other readers. I would say that on my BookTube channel, my 2 favorite reviews this year so far were Womb City by Tlotlo Somase. This was a dystopian fiction set in Botswana, and essentially women are hyper-controlled. They're under surveillance. They are controlled in the way that they think, the way that they speak. Their actions have to be audited every single day by their husband. They have to go in for regular checkups with the government. And this was a really interesting story. It kind of turned into horror halfway through. It wasn't necessarily the most positive review. I did not hate this book, but I felt it was overly rushed and that it took on too many issues in one short book. Like, I felt like it should have been a duology or a trilogy, and then it would have been 5 stars all the way. My second favorite review on my BookTube channel was my review of Hangman by Maya Binyam for the Women's Prize. This was a really difficult book for me to talk about. It was one that I did not enjoy reading, but one where I really appreciated what the author did with the story. And I think sometimes it's hard to talk about books that you didn't love, that you're critical of, because it's easy to just get like, oh, this was terrible, I don't see the point. And so I think that in that review, I actually really articulated well the value of the book and why people might like reading it and why people should persevere through reading it if they're a little uncomfortable with it. I think that I did a good job conveying why it might have been nominated for the Women's Prize. And while I think I was also clear about the things that I struggled with, I don't think that I let it turn into an overwhelmingly negative review. And so I appreciated that for myself. Question number 14, most beautiful book that you've bought so far this year. I just had 2 books show up at my house that are stunners. One is from Book of the Month and one is from Aardvark, and honestly, these covers are just gorgeous. So the one from Book of the Month is 1,000 Times Before by Asha Thanki. This was one of their selections for June. It was actually a book that I predicted, and I'm so excited to see this as one of their selections. This is about a woman who weaves a tapestry, and that tapestry connecting her to like her whole family's history, all the other women in the family. And then she has her wife, and she invites her wife into this connection. It sounds like a really beautiful and poignant read, and I love the cover of this. It's so colorful and bright. It's got that nice turquoise spine. I just love the cover design. And then the book that I got from Aardvark Book Club that is a huge stunner is Masquerade by Sangoyomi. This is so beautiful. I love the black background with this just regal queen in the front and the elephant behind her. This is just a beautiful cover. This was another book that I predicted as a possible selection for the book clubs, and again, super excited to see it get featured. This is a fantasy set in 15th century West Africa and follows one woman's struggle for freedom. I cannot wait to dive into this. This is another book that was highly anticipated in terms of releases this year. Actually, really, both of these were highly anticipated releases for me, so I'm super excited to have copies and to hopefully get to them soon. Question number 15, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Do you see these shelves behind me? Like, I know that you can only see a small snippet of my shelves here in this video, but realistically, I probably have 500 unread books in my house. That might even be a generous estimate. I really just need to be better about reading books that are on my shelf. I tend, like everyone, to get excited by new releases. I, go on NetGalley and request a lot of audiobooks and ARCs. I receive a lot of ARCs from publishers because of my Instagram. And so I need to be cognizant of the fact that while I am getting all these new releases, and that's very exciting, I also have a lot of really fantastic older books on my shelves. I established a book club with Jamie Kate called the Backlist Book Club that is designed to help us move books off of our bookshelf that were published over 5 years ago. You know, the ones that you got at some point you're super excited about, you set it on the bookshelves, you kind of forgot about it, got distracted by new shiny things, and then it's just been sitting there ever since. But it's still a book you really want to read. You know it's going to be good. Everybody loved it, but you just got to put your foot down and do it. So we're running that book club every other month basically, and we just finished my year of rest and relaxation last month, and it looks like we're going to be reading Wolf Hall in the upcoming month. So very excited about, you know, moving some of those older books off of my shelf, and that's kind of inspired me to really take a hard look at what's on my shelves and how to move it a little faster. I recently did a book organization video and I cleared off some books that I'm pretty sure I'm not going to read, and then it gave me time to refamiliarize myself with what's sitting here and what I really need to make a push to get to. So all the books. I have plenty on this shelf. I have plenty on my NetGalley shelf. I have plenty of ARCs on my paperback cart to get to, so everything. And that being said, that is the end of this video. I hope that you have found it interesting. But if you like this one, you know what to do. Hit that thumbs up button, comment down below, and let me know what was your best read so far of 2024, or your least favorite read. How many books have you read? Anything that you're excited to tell me about. I want to talk all things books. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button down below, as well as the notification bell, so that you never miss a video. And that way we can see each other again soon. Thanks so much for joining. Bye.